Our passage is taken from 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. Then Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one beside you. There is no rock like our God. Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and makes them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundation of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be broken. The Most High will thunder from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of the anointed one."
Well, I want to show you somebody called, I'm going to call him James. He's not a real person, but he's inspired by people who I meet and have come across, and people whose stories I've heard too. James is a generic young professional. James works in a job, he's graduated, and he's on that career ladder, and he's working hard at his job, and he's a Christian. And he wants to live for God in his workplace. And he works among other people. He's fairly junior. He works among other people who are more senior. People who work very hard at their job. People he wants to become more like. He wants to get better at his job and be like them. He wants to climb that career ladder and do more good in the generic professional job he's doing. But in James's case, he realizes that speaking to other people about his faith may feel a little pushy. Certainly he's got a sense that in this workplace, you don't speak to people about things like faith, about things like Jesus, about things like God's plan and God's kingdom. He gets the sense that people would think that's not professional, that people wouldn't really take him seriously because he's quite junior, because he's fairly new at his job. And he doesn't want to be that guy who people just tune out from listening to because he wants to talk about his faith all the time. Besides, he just doesn't think that anyone's going to listen. He is junior. He's not that well respected. But James does want to share his faith with people. So he says to himself, when I have got that promotion, when I've got more people who really will listen to me, when people really know that I'm serious about my job, that I am professional, when I have that position of respect and influence, well, of course, I'll tell people about Jesus. See, when I've got the respect and influence, people will listen. That's when people might really say, wow, if you think that, then it's worth taking on board. See, James believes something that quite a lot of us believe, and that is that we will have a bigger impact for God when we have a bigger influence. We will be used more by God when we can see our lives in the world being more influential, more powerful, more successful. If you think like that, well, you're not alone. People have always thought that. The people in 1 Samuel, the Old Testament people of God, the nation of Israel, they thought like that. They knew that they wanted to be a nation who were like the advert for God. And to be the nation that God wanted them to be, to advertise God, to tell the world just how great God was, well, they wanted to be a great nation themselves. They were going to want to have a really spectacular king. That would catch catch people's attention. That would get the respect of the world, and when the world respects Israel, then they can tell them about God. This song that begins 1 Samuel tells us that that is not true at all. God doesn't want you to be influential and strong before you can win the world. God has never asked his people to be spectacular and impressive and strong if he wants to use them. This song is going to teach us that God uses especially the weak and the forgotten. And we're going to see that again and again in the book of 1 Samuel. And this song at the beginning works like a bit of an overture. If you ever go to a symphony, you go to the field down the road, and you see a concerto or a symphony with multiple movements, and you go and you listen and they play this piece, and you think, oh, that's beautiful, and you clap. But you're the only one who claps because everyone else knows that there's more movements to come. And they think, oh yes, I'm very sophisticated because I knew not to clap, because then we move into the second movement. Oh, well, what happens is in those second and third and fourth movements, you get a theme, you get a tune, the tune that you all know, something recognizable. And that's the bit you really come for. But at the beginning, there's what's called an overture, a little piece that contains all those tunes, all those themes that then you listen to properly when you get to the second and third movement. But the overture contains those themes in miniature. And that is exactly what's going on here. We've got an overture. We've got the theme of the book of 1 Samuel. The theme that we're going to be spending a lot of time in is right here in this song, that God is going to be using here, and he will use today, the weak and the forgotten. We don't discover the truth of this just through it saying that to us. We discover the truth of this through entering Hannah's experience of being someone who is hurting but heard. It's here it might be helpful to have your Bibles open, especially a paper Bible that you can flip between one page and another, because turn back with me to chapter 1. Hannah's experience is really heartbreaking. Look at verses 6 to 8. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, it's chapter 1, 6 to 8. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival, it's the other wife. She's in a home with another wife. And she's called her rival. Her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why do you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? It's heartbreaking how nobody sees her pain. How there's this mouthy rival putting her down all the time. She does go to pray, verse 10. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. This may speak to you, particularly if this is something you resonate with. Of course, on Sunday mornings, we turn up most of the time with a smiley, happy face. Perhaps you don't feel right now that you're resonating with it because you've got the defences up right now. But later in the week, this will surface. The grief, the disappointment, a mouthy bully, bitter weeping. And maybe you resonate with Hannah's sense that no one understands. The very people close to you say, why are you weeping? Surely there's something that you can, something close by at hand that you can take joy in. It's not all that important what you're experiencing. Or even the people who do understand, they can't help. I mean, even if Elkanah was the most supportive, and Elkanah is the name of her husband, and even if Elkanah was the most supportive and sympathetic of husbands, he still can't help. Because he can't do anything to enable her to have children. And maybe that's your experience. Your suffering is just something that people can't help with. And maybe if this isn't your experience immediately today, or this morning, well, we all know that hurt is part of all of our experiences. Hannah is hurting, so she takes it to the Lord. In chapter 1, verse 11, she says she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. Hannah takes it to the Lord, and the song that we are looking at in particular in chapter 2, well, that is a joyful song, and it's born out of the fact that she knows that when she was hurting, she was heard. Have a look at chapter 2, verse 1. Then Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord, my horn, that means my strength, is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. She was hurting, but she was heard. She says this lovely line in the middle of verse 3. For the Lord is a God who knows. Not just because he knows everything. This song gives us, kind of flags up for us that God pays special attention to the weak and the hurting. If you look on to say verse 8, it says that he raises the poor from the dust. God has got his eyes on the poor people in the dust and the needy from the ash heap. It is particularly with the poor and needy God is concerned. So it's not just a comfort in times of grief, but every ordinary people, every ordinary person, everybody with weakness, everyone without power and influence, everybody lonely, everyone getting on with life quietly, almost invisibly. God is a God who knows. You can be someone hurting, but heard. And Hannah wants you to know, I want you to know, God is particularly attentive to your needs, to your prayers. In fact, it's especially people hurting but heard, people like you. It's especially people like you he uses for his most amazing plans. Hannah's song is for the person who's hurting but heard, and it teaches us to be hopeful but helpless. I read this week an illustration of a man. It's one of those old-fashioned sermon illustrations. It comes across as a nice little story of a man who was on a ship from the UK to the US back in the days when it was like 1920s ocean liners, think Titanic. He booked his ticket to sail the Atlantic all the way from, he was a Scotsman, I don't know if that's relevant. He was a Scotsman, he went from Scotland to America. And so he bought his ticket. It wasn't a fancy ticket, it wasn't the first class ticket, but he bought his ticket and got on board, and he was prepared for a voyage that was going to take him quite a few days. So he packed with him some food that he would need on his journey. He packed the normal kind of packed lunch things. He packed some sandwiches and some fruit and some vegetables. And of course, that was fine for 2 days. Maybe you'd say only for 1 day. After 2 days, his bread got stale. He was still edible, he still managed to eat it, he put up with it, he knew what to expect. His bread was stale after 2 or 3 days, and then on day 4, 5, 6, the fruit started to go a bit soft and squishy. But it was all he had. And so he started eating that too. By day 7, he was nearly there, and he decided that he would take the money in his wallet and go down to the restaurant and pay for one last fancy meal on this line before he got to America. He was all out of his own food, so he was going to pay for a nice meal at the restaurant. Only he got down to the restaurant, and they said to him, they didn't say, "Where's your money?" They said, "Where's your ticket?" He showed them the ticket, and they said, "This is included." This was always included. You could have come down here every day. You needn't have been eating stale bread and rotten fruit. This was always included. And that is a tale that tells us that there is something wonderful available, but only for those who don't try to do it by their own strength. See, Hannah's song is one where we focus both on the needy who God raises up, but on the strong who God brings down. Have a look at verses 4 to 7. The bows of the warriors are broken. but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who are hungry no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who's had many sons pines away. Now there are 2 sides in this song. The side of the person who the Lord brings up and raises up and honours, but also the side of the person who's doing it in their own strength. The side of the person who's never really learned to turn to God, who has never in their hurt been heard, because they've never turned to God. There is a side in this song where God says to the people who rely on their strength, not you. Not you. That strength will not last. Those sandwiches will go stale. That fruit will go mouldy. In your own strength, you will not prevail. If our hope is in a God who provides for the lowly, and if that really comforts us, then it should make sense that we are the kind of people who think it's normal to be prayerfully dependent on God and not try to take pride in being self-sufficient. I think this should be normal for us to accept our own helplessness. Be people who talk about weakness and helplessness and look with hope to what God will bring out of our situations. But I find it quite hard to take Hannah at her word in this song. So I think we all take the posture, and I certainly do, of knowing I'm weak, but I strive for strength instead of striving in prayer. Of keeping in my heart pride in my strength. I'm glad about what I can achieve, and I'm a little bit ashamed of my weakness. Think about what that weakness is in your life and how you feel admitting that. It might be that you've got a struggle with a particular sin. It might be you feel overwhelmed with life. You might be suffering the consequences of bad decisions you've made. Or you might just be suffering from a lack of sleep, a sick family member. Or it might be like Hannah, unable to have children. It might be anxiety, fatigue, doubt. The list goes on. We are all weak somewhere, and yet we get ourselves into this strange situation where we feel ashamed to admit that weakness to people in our Connect group when we ask for prayer requests. As if there's some sort of shame or problem in being weak. We try to solve our own problems, struggle through those challenges without praying. As if we can manage, we can be strong. That's the person that we should be strong. And we look at the people in our lives that we see who are strong and successful and sorted, and we think, if only I could be like that. Let me take a leaf out of their book. Let me become like the person who has got excellent time management, whose life is not chaotic, who sleeps 9 hours every night, who achieves all they want to achieve, whose parents are very pleased and proud of them. Let's be that person. Let's be a success. We want to do that. We subscribe to their feeds, don't we? We read their books. We want to become like the strong ones. Well, there is no shame in being weak. In fact, there is a warning in being strong. Why would you want to be doing it in your own strength? Wherever you're feeling weak, Hannah's song invites you to hope in God to help you. And it warns you not to envy the strong. In this song, the person you want to be is not the warrior with the bow, but the one whose stumbled. The person you don't want to be is the one who's full, but the one who is hungry. Because there is something even better available as long as you know you need it. As long as you know you can turn to God for help. It means it's a mistake to think like James, our man at the beginning, our generic young professional. It's a mistake to think that God is waiting for you to become influential, to be in a position of strength and respect before he calls you to serve him in a particularly strong and transformative way. In fact, you know what? Here's what God is saying today. It is his habit to use the weak and lowly. To use that very junior person that James wishes he wasn't. That is exactly who God is going to use. What we come to expect in this song is that the person in James's junior position, the person without respect, the person without influence and honour, that's the one God will use to do something amazing. While Hannah looks at the people who stand tall with their heads held high at what they've achieved, and she sings, those people get brought low. The theme of this song, and why not make this the theme of your life? To trust that the Lord will take your weakness and your struggle, and he'll do something amazing with that. So as well as being hopeful, but helpless, when God does something amazing, we are honoured, but humble. There is a danger in this passage if we take these verses as a promise of prosperity. So look, for example, at verse 8. It says, he raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and makes them inherit a throne of honour. Does that seem to you like God is saying, he will use the weak and he'll make the weak strong? He will make you strong. He'll make you famous. He'll give you a throne. But it's not saying that. It is not saying that he transforms the position of the lowly people to then be strong. Notice that Hannah wasn't actually honoured in her own day. We remember Hannah today because her story brings glory to God. Not because of how famous she became, not because of how influential she became, not how wonderfully comfortable the Lord made her life after that, but because she did something that served the Lord. That is what we mean by honour. That is what we mean by inherit a throne of honour. Not that she got a wonderful life, but that she served the Lord. The great honour of being the mother of Samuel was the fact that not that Samuel became the most popular and powerful person in Israel, but that Samuel had a life that served the Lord. Hannah's throne of honour was all about being known as someone who serves the Lord. She's honoured, but she doesn't become famous. And she doesn't get the respect of people, other than people who know, I respect you because you serve the Lord. And so she does say, and this is always still true, at the end of verse 9, hopefully you know how to do sign language for this, that it is not by strength that one overcomes. I looked up the word prevail, and it's not there in the online BSL dictionary. Prevail, apparently you don't have a sign for that, but overcome is a good one. It is not by strength that one prevails. Hannah is not saying, the Lord made me strong, and because he made me strong, then strength is what we needed, and that's how I prevailed. She says, I remained weak the whole time, and I gave up my little boy to serve at the temple. We're going to find next week what goes on when Samuel's at the temple. He's the weak one, Samuel. He's not very well respected. In fact, all the way through 1 Samuel, the heroes are not the ones who are respected. It is not through strength that they are going to prevail. In fact, that's what we want to call what we're calling our whole sermon series. Not by strength. The pattern here isn't that God exalts the weak with glory that the world would give. The weak and the lowly are exalted by God because he uses people like Hannah and Samuel in his plan. That's their honour, that God used them. Their honour is they get to serve God. And it brings him glory. It's a pattern of Hannah. That's the pattern of Samuel. And it tees up the pattern of the main character, King David. He is weak and lowly and forgotten. And God raises him from obscurity to be the anointed king. And yet David's legacy is marked by writing songs of dependence like, the Lord is my shepherd. David, when he's seen most gloriously, is one who's saying, yeah, no, I'm like a sheep and God is the one who's strong. The thing is, David's story isn't the best story because he did get worldly exaltation. He did get an actual throne and money and fame, and, well, he used that to do pretty terrible things. And the world wasn't saved through Israel in David's day. See, David isn't the hero of this story. He's a pattern of the one who would be the hero of God's story. The one through whom God would indeed bless the whole world. The more obscure anointed one. The one born in a shed. Jesus. Jesus is the one that we say did great things. Jesus is the one we say is honoured by the Lord. But what is his great thing that he did? Being betrayed, being abandoned, and dying a criminal's death, being flogged, stripped naked, and hung up on a cross. That's his glory. That's the honour that Jesus was lifted up to. A death of disgrace, because his honor, that's glorious because that was the Father's will. Because it was God's plan to save the world. Hannah's song says that God exalts the lowly, faithful person who serves him, but exaltation means getting to be like Jesus. Getting to be humble. Getting to serve. Getting to give yourself up for others. So it means that the message to us is that God always uses the weak to do amazing things, but you know that those amazing things will still look weak. They will still look small and humble. They will still be serving other people. We need to learn to see things a bit differently. Later on in 1 Samuel, we're going to get to one of the most famous verses in the book, and it is one that says this: people look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And we begin learning that even now in chapter 2. We're learning to see Hannah not through outward appearances, but as someone greatly honoured. Someone greatly honoured because she got to serve God. I want us to learn to see our own situations like that, and the situations of other people around us. Lowly people faithfully modelling Jesus quietly at home when they're the only Christian in that home. In the eyes of the world, that's pretty humble. In the eyes of God, that is honoured. Look at the person who stands up for what is right in a workplace, even though they're going to face the glare of others and the judgment of others. But they're doing what is right in a really hard situation, living for God in that situation. They're greatly honoured by God. They've been given the honour of serving him and suffering for him. Let's see that person as honoured. But it's humble in our eyes. But there are people that we support in this church who bring the good news of Jesus to other people in closed countries where you're not allowed to speak about Jesus. And those people's lives do not look spectacular or strong. God has kept those people weak, and yet they're honoured. They've been lifted up to a throne of honour because their life's legacy is that they served the Lord. Just as an aside, if we start to learn this, we take on Hannah's own attitude for what we want for our children if you're a parent. Hannah's delighted that she is honoured as her child serves the Lord. The greatest honour a parent can have is their child wants to follow and serve the Lord all the days of their life. We should be parents who feel honoured by that. And think of your own situation, complete with your own timidity, your illness, your baggage, your hurt, your tiredness, your chaotic life. Hurting, you're hurt by God. Yet you are hopeful that he uses the weak in his plan. You're hopeful yet helpless, not doing it in your own strength. Well, if you know that, then serve him where you are. Honour him in your small, obscure, weak life. Look beyond your own weakness to the Lord Jesus. Trust verse 10. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Ultimately fulfilled in the person of Jesus. Know that this is how God works in the world. You follow Jesus. You follow the King. So learn to depend on him. Pray to him. Lean on his strength, not your own. And as you follow the steps of Jesus, humbly serving, he will exalt you to a throne of honour. Because you will be exalted as someone whose life brings glory to God. Exalted, but still weak. Still quiet. Still obscure. Honoured, but humble.